All right, what's up, everybody? Well, welcome to another podcast here at the Light Church. We call it the podcast in the upper room. We're not in the upper room anymore, but nonetheless, we still have some great content for you today. Today's content is going to come from a podcast with Tab Sims. He's one of my great friends. He's an elder here at the Light Church, and he is a person who is incredibly equipped to be talking about our subject today, which is over stewardship and tithing. Today's podcast is going to be pretty long. It's actually about an hour long, so we're breaking it into two different segments. The first segment is going to be over stewardship. Part 2 is going to be over tithing. So make sure that you tune in, catch both of them. Don't miss a single thing. As the famous song says, I don't want to miss a thing. Don't miss a thing on this podcast. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into part number 1, stewardship.
And so today we have with us Tab Sims. Tab, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it is, but you are very equipped to walk us through what we're going to be talking about today. And it's funny. I was telling Toby yesterday when I told him that you were going to be on the podcast, I have notebooks from high school and college age when you were my Sunday school teacher.
Right.
And I have like a lot of these notes that we're going to be talking about. I have those literally written down in notebooks. And I pulled one out, and literally when I opened it and I showed it to Toby, dust flew off of it, and it was hilarious.
It's been a while.
I haven't been really looking at that recently, and I said, no, not this particularly. But it was fun to look at because I have just pages of like goals that you encouraged us to write down, short-term, mid-term, long-term goals.
Right.
And it's interesting to see the goals that I haven't met yet, even on short-term goals that were 20 years ago, and goals that I actually have been able to achieve. So it's pretty cool. I say all that to say this, that in my book, you are very knowledgeable in stewardship.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. I truly believe that. And so last week we had Lance McWhorter on, and I'm here to actually have you set the record straight on. Not just playing.
Oh no.
Just playing. Lance did an amazing job. We talked about finances. We talked about money. We talked about investments. Today I want to really talk more towards stewardship, which is going to have to do with finances, of course.
Sure.
But we're talking about our time, our talents, and our treasures, things that go along with that. So there's a book that you gave me to read a long time ago. It's by Randy Alcorn, and it's Money, Possessions, and Eternity. And I know that you're very familiar with that book. One of the things that Randy Alcorn says is, he says, if Christ isn't Lord over our money and possessions, then he's not our Lord, right? So how can we tell, like, if Christ is actually the Lord over our money and possessions? Is there a test that we can do? Is there a way that we can examine our hearts, our spending habits? Like, how can we tell if Jesus Christ is Lord over our money and possessions?
That's a good question, and we live in a world where we have electronic monitors. I've got one that I can tell my heart rate, and fortunately it doesn't tell how many calories I intake in a given time period. But there are ways that we can check almost everything these days, and I would say if you want to check and see if your heart is aligned with Jesus as your Lord and Savior, just look at your checkbook. Or I guess in the world of debit cards, if you get a statement, just look at what you're spending your money on.
Yep.
When you do your taxes every year, look at how much aggregate you contributed that year to your local church. We're in a generation that loves to drink coffee, and I'm not picking on coffee drinkers.
Come on, Tab, be easy on me.
I understand. You can apply it to Cokes or ice cream just as well.
Be easy on me still. Come on.
But if your family, you and your spouse are spending $5 each a day on a latte or frappuccino or whatever these things are, that's $10 a day. That's $3,650 a year. Ooh. Wow. So when you look at it like that and you extrapolate it out, and then you sit down and you look at all of your expenses and you look at how much you gave to your local church or you gave in God's causes, if you're not giving more than you're spending on yourself for coffee, then their priorities are out of whack there. Yeah. So, and it's not just coffee, ice creams, and Cokes. It can be Xbox or golf or fishing or purses or shoes. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things.
Yeah.
Not at all. But they have to be in the correct priority. And so if you're spending 10% of your income on coffee or ice cream,
Yeah.
which is totally discretionary, and you're not giving, then you got a heart problem, and you need to
Yep.
converse with God over that.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. Man, that's such that's a hard thing to do. Lance and I talked about actually putting our time on paper. Like, what do we do all day long from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening? What did I do at work? And making sure that we were stewarding our time well. That's the same exact thing, but from a financial perspective is, where did every penny that I spent today or this month or this year, where did it go? And with the time one, we were talking about how it's not fun to look at. Like, it's not surprising, but it's surprising whenever you look at it, and I think our finances would be the same.
I
way.
think you'd be shocked if you really tallied it up at what we let money slip away and we have nothing to show for it.
Yep, it's very easy to do in a world where everything's a subscription. Now you don't necessarily DirecTV. Most people don't have DirecTV. They have subscriptions to TV channels.
Right.
I go through my statements every month, and there's a section of it that's just subscriptions that we have. So, and that makes it easy. You don't have to feel the pain of a big bill. It's a small one. It's a subscription. So, so Lance and I, we were talking a lot about investments last week. We talked about risk versus reward, and the more that this week went on, I started thinking about it. The most solid investment that we can make is that's guaranteed to bring a positive return is an investment into things that are eternal, right? So can you name some earthly investments that we can make that are going to have an eternal impact?
Sure. There's so many, and almost anything that you do in the name of the Lord has eternal consequences. And just a few examples. This is summertime where churches are sending kids off to camp, and there's a lot of kids that their families' budgets are pretty stretched, and you can donate a scholarship so that a kid or an adult gets to go to camp or gets to go to a seminar, and that draws them nearer to Christ. There's so many eye-opening moments and life-changing moments at adult seminars or at kids' camps where their eternity is impacted. We over the years have supported a number of children through Compassion International that they're in undeveloped countries in Africa and South America and Central America, and it's like $50 or $55 a month, I think now. But they, with that money, the organization does a great job. I think 97% of the money they receive actually goes to their sponsored kids, and they get a good diet, they get clothes, but they also get a Christian education. They're introduced to Christ. So we sponsor some of these little kids. We sponsored them since they were 4 or 5 years old, so they grow up at least hearing about Jesus and hearing about the love of God and the sacrifice of Christ. So that's an investment in eternity. Or you can take somebody to lunch. I took a guy to Chicken E the other day, and just over lunch we got to have a great spiritual conversation. So you've got to eat lunch. A lot of people eat out. If you can just grab somebody that and I'd never met the guy before that day, but it was a divine appointment that God had. So that's investing. That's sending your treasure on to heaven from today's world.
I think you gave 3 examples. Every one of those is within reach of what 99% of Americans are able to actually do. It's hard to send a kid to camp for $200, but if you budget in $20 a month over the next year, you can send a kid to camp. Taking someone out to lunch, you're exactly right. It's something that I do every single day is eat lunch. Why not just take somebody with me? Those are very achievable. I laughed because when you talked about the Compassion International, I've been with your daughter before at camps or concerts, and where they bring out sponsoring a child, and she'll come out of there, when she was in high school, and you were about to sponsor 10 kids in Uganda. And,
yes, indeed.
So it's funny because you said, you've had them, kids that were, 4 years old, and you sponsor them until they're 18. So you've actually probably graduated a lot of these kids and taken on more. And so what a and I know Miss Janet would hate for me to bring her into it, but she writes them letters and actually invest into those kids that y'all have never actually got to meet face to face.
But we'll meet many of them in heaven.
Yep.
And not only them personally, but we may meet family members or you never know that circle of influence and what they do with it. So we're looking. That's one of the things I look forward to is somebody that you never met before, running down the halls of heaven, yelling your name.
Yeah.
Because they recognize us from pictures that we correspond, and they run up to you and just throw your arms around you and hug you because, hey, you made it possible for me to know Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's...
Man, that gives you chills.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And that's easy to do. Man, I was thinking about one when you were talking about that, of just like being available to be used by the local church, by God in any area. Volunteering... my family was changed. My mom got saved at a tent revival back in the 80s, I believe. And, it's just like something that is so easy to be like, oh, we'll do that next year or something. If you're the church that's putting that on, it's easy to find a bit of laziness within you and go, oh, we'll do it one day, right? But, man, just even doing the small things, volunteering at a tent revival, that changed my whole family's direction. And so it doesn't have to be financial to steward well in this aspect to make eternal impact. So just being willing is a great thing. I got another question, and I'm going to kind of set it up for you, okay? A believer's view of reality, the way that I see this, should be much different than a non-believer. So the way that we see the world should be from a kingdom perspective. But I'm really bad at this. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap myself out. There's a lot of times when I don't always see things from an eternal perspective. It's very easy for me to see things from this worldly perspective. It's easy for me to see things that are just up close, not things that are far off. So I'm going to kind of use that analogy of I can see things close, not far off. How can we put on the glasses, the lens, to be able to see things from an eternal perspective rather than just this worldly here and now perspective?
I think Paul addressed that in Colossians chapter 3, verse 2, where he said, set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. That comes under the category of easier said than done.
True.
Because we live in the here and now. The email is blowing up, the text machine is blowing up, the phone, everything is blowing up, everything is clamoring for your attention.
Yep.
Spammers have your number and they call all the time. And I think Satan deceives us. The Bible says that he is a master liar and a deceiver, and he's very good. I mean, if you think about it, he and all the angels are in heaven with God. They see the glory of God. They were created by God. But Satan is so good that he convinced a third of them to rebel against God, and they all got kicked out of heaven.
Yeah. How do you do that?
So how does he do that? He's very good at catching us up in the mainstream of the here and now. And, I see, one of the things I see that, and it was prevalent when our kids were growing up too, but it's even more so now, is kids that are 6 and 8 years old that are part of traveling athletic clubs or cheerleading clubs or dance clubs. And that Satan uses that, whether it's traveling baseball or soccer or volleyball or dance or cheerleading, he uses that to pull parents and kids out of church because they schedule it over the weekend, and he justifies it, or he incentivizes it by saying, well, your kid's going to get behind if they don't start at an early age. Everybody else is doing it at an early age. So if they're going to get a scholarship or get noticed by blah, 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 then they need to do it starting at age, little bitty kids. But again, that's a distraction and a deception by Satan to get us caught up in that. And not only is he a liar and deceiver, but he's also a master marketer. I mean, he markets that temporal lifestyle that is all about possessions and experiences. And we get on social media, and he paints this beautiful picture that, well, you're just not with it unless you're on summer vacation at somewhere really, really nice, or you're not driving a certain vehicle or living a certain lifestyle. And we get caught up in that, and we need to. I think it's a discipline, which self-discipline is one of the fruits of the Spirit, but it's probably one of those that doesn't get exercised maybe as much as some of the others. That and patience.
Yeah.
But it's almost a self-discipline to, and maybe you write sticky notes and put them everywhere to set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth.
Yeah.
And that'll help you to reorient and not fall into his traps.
Yeah. I think one prayer that I've started praying over the past couple of months is just a prayer of, like, a intentional prayer of daily surrender.
Yeah.
And I've always known that and believed that, but I've tried to make myself be very intentional to have to say it out loud that, okay, God, today I surrender to you.
Every day.
And that means that my thoughts are surrendered to you, my time is surrendered to you. When I don't want to do something but you've called for me to, I'm surrendered, so I don't care, even if it's inconvenient. And you know what? It makes it a whole lot easier to do inconvenient things whenever I've been surrendered to him.
Yes.
And so I think you're absolutely right. It just boils down to surrender.
Your mindset.
Yeah, setting your mind on the things above. This is kind of a scary thought right here, but Scripture teaches us absolute certainty. We're going to give an account to the Lord, right? For everything that He's entrusted us to steward. And like I said, that's a lot of different things. Mainly boils down to our time, our talents, and our treasures, our money. We're going to give an account of what we did with those things to the Lord. And so, like I said, I think that boils down to stewardship. So how do I, you brought a message to the men at our crawfish boil whenever a bunch of people cheated and won in the beanbag toss thing.
Yeah, cornhole.
I think I won.
Yes,
but
I'm sure you did.
Kyle cheated. But you brought a message that night before that over stewardship. Do you remember anything specifically about that night that you would share just to our worldwide audience about stewardship?
I do. The main thing to remember is, who does it really belong to? What do you own? And if you ask that to the general population, they'll say, well, I own a house, I own these cars, I own this, that, and the other. But actually you don't. You don't really own your home if you think about it. If you have a mortgage on it, well, the bank actually has authority over it. If your house is paid off, all the taxing entities, if you don't pay your taxes, they're going to come get your house. You don't even own your own life. You can't add a single minute to your time appointed. And you can shorten it by your behavior, eating the wrong foods, never exercising, those sorts of things. Driving intoxicated, you can shorten your life from the days that are intended. But when you realize that, and you touched on this, when you realize that everything belongs to the Lord, everything is His, and we're just managers of it. And you have a morning exercise where you go and surrender. And quite frequently I'll go into my office in the morning and I will just mentally take everything, cows, land, cars, vehicles, and just shove it all into the center of the table and say, God, this is yours. How do I best manage it today? Because God told Adam, one of the first conversations in the Bible, one of the first directives, I guess, that He gave Adam was He put him in the garden and said, I want you to tend and keep this garden. It's mine, but you're the manager, you're the steward of it. And so those words, tend and keep, connotate cultivation. You cultivate the soil. You take care of things so that they grow and they prosper. So part of our job is to cultivate, and that's your family, beginning with your spouse, your children, your grandchildren, the people around you. You cultivate them, putting them in a position to thrive as a child of God. It touches your time, which you and Lance have already touched on. It talks about your possessions. All of this belongs to God. So if you are called and God lays it on your heart to buy somebody a new set of tires for their vehicle,
Yep.
well, those are God's dollars in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Those 4-ball tires are on the vehicle that God actually owns. So it just makes it easy to make that transference.
Mm-hmm.
So we think about in our mental warfare of physical and temporary things of this world versus things that have eternal value.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about how short this life really is. It doesn't matter if it's 60 years or 80 or 90 years, but you compare that to eternity.
Yep. It's a dot.
It's a dot. It's a tiny dot. But what we do in this life determines the positioning for that entire eternity. And I want to share a cut, and this is going to take a minute.
You're good.
But it's worth it. This is really rich. I want to share a couple of parables that Jesus told, and they're very similar, but they're also different.
Mm-hmm.
But they're very important. In Matthew chapter 25, it's the parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants. So these are believers, his own people.
Yep.
And he gave one 5 talents, and another one he gave 2 talents, and then another one he gave 1 talent, each according to his own ability. So that tells us right up front that I shouldn't compare myself to you because God gave you perhaps more and different abilities than he gave me.
Yep.
And that's fine. He's not going to judge me on what he gave you. He's
Yeah.
going to judge me based on what he gave me.
Yep.
And he knows me.
Mm-hmm.
He knows me better than I know myself. So he knows what I'm capable of. He knows that potential. He knows if I am cultivating and developing what he put inside of me.
Yep.
So he gave them the talent. Then he went on a journey. And the dude that got the 5 talents went and traded, and he made an additional 5 talents, which will be about $300,000 per talent in today's. Well, that was before Bidenomics. So,
Bidenomics.
but previously about
$1.5
$300,000 per talent. So he left them with about $1 million. This guy with about $1.5 million, and he made $1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
The other guy 2, he doubled his. And then the other guy, he said. He received 1 and went and dug in the ground and he hid it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a long time, the Lord of these servants came and settled accounts. And so he called the first servant in. Hey, you gave me 5. I doubled it. Hey, high five. Come on in. I'm going to make you ruler over 10 cities.
Yep.
Next, the dude that comes in, you gave me 2. I doubled it. The master said, good job. High five. I'm going to make you ruler over 5 cities.
Mm-hmm.
Then one dude came in that got the 1, and he said, well, I really didn't know what to do. You're a hard man, and so I hid it.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do anything with it.
Yep.
And the Lord said, you are a wicked and lazy servant.
Mm.
You should have at least put it with the bank. Now remember, we're talking about believers.
Yeah.
In this first line, it says his own servants. So this was his own servants that he called out as wicked and lazy. And then there's another parable very similar to this in Luke chapter 19, the minas. Same principle. A certain nobleman or prince went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom
Mm-hmm.
and to return. So this is a picture of Jesus. He's talking about himself. He's a prince. I'm going to go on a journey. I'm going to be gone for a while. I'm going up to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll be back. And when I come back, we're going to settle accounts.
Yep.
And so he did. He returned, and he called the first dude in and said, hey, what'd you do with the 10 mina? And he said, well, I turned the 10 you gave me into 10 more. Now, a mina is like $100. The talent, remember, was like 300 grand.
Yeah.
So Jesus, he may give you the equivalent of 300,000 in time, talent, resources,
Mm-hmm.
or he may give you $100 worth.
Yeah.
But as you go through here, you're going to see, and the second dude came in and said, you gave me 5, I earned 5. High five, come in, good job. The one that had 1 said, I feared you because you were an austere man. You collect what you did not deposit and reap what you didn't sow. And Jesus said, out of your own mouth I will judge you, you wicked servant.
Golly.
Why didn't you put my money in the bank so that I could at least have collected interest? So 2 thoughts there. Jesus is checking to see how faithful you're going to be with a whole lot, or he may be checking to see how faithful you are with just a very little bit.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, throughout all eternity, it didn't matter if you had 300,000 or $100. You still were made ruler over many things if you performed well and you were faithful. So that is encouraging to people like me who maybe we don't have the talents that some people that I look around and see that I'm like, man, God really blessed them with just everything, because God's going to judge them like that. The other thing that is interesting is in each of these parables, the one out of the 3 went and hid what they were given. They didn't put it with the bank to draw 2%, 3%, 4% interest. And I think the reason that they didn't put it with the bank is anytime you make a deposit with the bank, there's a record.
Yeah.
There's a record of that deposit. I think these guys didn't tell anybody because nobody else knew but the one that gave it to them, and they went and hid it, and they thought, if he doesn't come back, that's mine. Well, that's the attitude that we have when we don't tithe. God said, I'm going to bless you with this life, these resources, this money, your paycheck, your income. But a tenth of that, which is what a tithe means, a tenth of that's mine.
Yep.
It's all really his, but a tenth of that I have a claim on. You give it back to me.
Yeah.
First rattle out of the box, you give that first check you write. You give that back to me. But so many Christians, I think, are guilty of, well, I'm gonna hide it down here, and maybe he won't know.
Yeah.
Which is extremely short-sighted. So I don't know. I just know there are degrees of reward in heaven. Trust me, if you accept Christ on your deathbed and you get in heaven that way at the last minute, that's better than not being there. Heaven's going to be awesome for everybody, but there are degrees of reward, and there should be. So I think if we will keep that in mind as well, that what we're doing here on earth impacts our eternity. And so it's an inspiration for us to keep working, keep doing.
Yeah, it is. That's that's really good. I love that. One thing that I picked up on that is how every penny is belongs to the Lord, but He is going to see how you're going to spend every one of those pennies, whether it's $300,000 that converts into $1.5 million by the end of the investments and the way that He used that money, or whether it's $10 that turns into $100.
Right.
God doesn't need the money, right? Like that's where I am, even with with the church. Whenever you talk about tithing in church, they go, "Oh, okay, the preacher's just trying to get a raise or whatever it is." That's the craziest thing. If I would have to take 10 Xanax a day if I thought that my paycheck relied on other people at the church.
You're echoing what Jesus himself said here and pointed out in Luke 19, chapter 12. He said, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom. He was already wealthy. Yeah. And he was going to inherit a kingdom. Yeah. Those 10 minas, they didn't mean anything to him financially. Yeah. It was about
very small,
setting you and I up so that he can reward us for being faithful. Yeah. God is a giver. Yeah. And God wants to reward us, so he gives all of us 3 things. He gives us time. Some people he may give 20 years, some people he may give 60 or 90 or whatever it is. He gives us time. He gives us talents. Yep. And he gives us resources. And we'll be judged in this arena with what we did with those 3 things. So our stewardship not only is over financial matters, it's over our family, it's over our possessions. I mean, changing the oil in your vehicle, as it's recommended, is good stewardship.
True.
Rotating your tires, something as simple as that. Turning the light switch off when you leave a room.
Did Brittany tell you to say that?
No. That's for someone else I know I'm very, very good friends with. But all of those are examples of good stewardship, and it sets us up for the rewards that God has for us. But the greatest single thing that He has entrusted us with is the gospel.
True.
That is our greatest possession. Our greatest possession is the good news of Jesus Christ. So that is an area that all of us can be faithful in. It is just sharing the gospel.
Yep.
And that's actually what brings the greatest reward when you read the Bible. Those who lead others to Christ will shine like the stars in the heavens. So, we all have that opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, that's that eternal perspective that we need to keep in mind. Man, that's really good. Randy Alcorn, another quote from his book, he said that the missing ingredient to why so many Christians are bad with stewardship is motivation. They don't have the correct motivation. Do you agree with that statement? And if you do or you don't, why?
Well, I think it's a true statement, but you can also use Jesus' own words here. It could be that we're just lazy or that we're just wicked.
Ooh.
If you're consciously making a decision to not tithe, and you know you should, then you're wicked. I'm sorry if that offends you, but you're wicked if that's your mindset. Or if you don't want to serve at the local church, you don't want to pull over on the side of the road and help somebody change a tire that obviously can't change it themselves. That's just being lazy. But all of that goes back, you could call it motivation. If you lack an eternal perspective, then you're not going to be motivated to do anything for the kingdom. But if you and the Bible is full of Jesus in the Word of God talking about rewards. So it's not a secret.
Yeah.
He wants to reward us. He tells us that He's going to reward us. That should be very motivating to anybody that does that. So why we don't, it could be wickedness, it could be laziness, it could be lack of self-discipline, whatever you want to call it. But
it all boils down to that eternal perspective that just kind of keeps coming up over and over. It's seeing things through an eternal perspective. Right. And we have the hardest time seeing, past today and our AT&T bill that's due, and it's hard to get to that eternal perspective.
One thing to remember, if you're going through life, if you can see something, it's temporary.
True.
At the end of the day, cars, houses, trees, everything is burned up and done over. So eternity is the things you can't see, the acts of kindness, the gifts, the sharing of the gospel. Those have eternal value.
Yep.
And that's where we should, if we're smart, if we're good stewards, that's where we'll invest our time and our money.
Yep. I agree. I think that it's easy for us to look and find happiness. Like we try to find happiness, and most people know this, but if we try to find happiness in things that we can touch, then those things will go away. The other day, Brittany was cooking chicken fried steak. So I'll go on record. I'll say this. Brittany's baking skills, they're kind of rough. She knows that. She would say that on air too. I probably shouldn't, but they're kind of rough. But her ability to make chicken fried steak is, it is amazing.
Awesome.
Like it's so good. And I've went on record and told my mom that it's better than hers.
Oh, wow.
I am that.
That's brave.
I believe in her chicken fried steak that much. And so the other day she was making some chicken fried steak, and I asked her, I said, how much longer till everything's ready? And she said, it's going to be about 20 more minutes. And I was starving. I was absolutely starving. And so my go-to snack in my house is Cheez-Its. I
love Cheez-Its.
They're so good.
That's great.
So I just grabbed a handful, and I ate a handful, and I was still hungry. And, she's still over there, whipping up the gravy and doing everything. So I grabbed another handful of Cheez-Its, and I ate them, and then supper was ready. And I sat down to eat. And when I was making my plate, I realized I'm really not even that hungry anymore. My favorite meal and my plate, it was just I got a little piece of chicken fried steak, a little bit of mashed potatoes, and just had some gravy on top of it. My plate, like the portion that was on my plate, was smaller than what my kids even had. And I thought that was a pretty good illustration of kind of how we view things of this world. We fill up on things that are here that we can grab, that are accessible, and there could be so much reward in heaven. We could have these full plates, these crowns that are full that we'll lay down at Jesus' feet. But we filled up on things that were really, it's a good snack, but it's not a good meal.
Right.
And, I feel like the enemy tries to lie to us into this idea that possessions are what's going to buy us happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know that that's the case. So my question is, we know that Satan's successful at manipulating us and lying to us that this is going to buy me happiness. But my question is, how is he so successful at this? Because we know that this is what he does.
Yeah. So since we know that Satan is a liar, if he is telling us something, then the opposite of what he's telling us is the truth.
True.
So he's telling us that, well, if you'll buy this car or these clothes or go on this vacation, that'll bring you happiness. And there's a difference between happiness and joy.
Sure.
Happiness is controlled by external circumstances. If you get a raise at work, or if it rains 2 inches in the middle of July,
that might be joy.
You're happy. But if you have salvation and you know that you're going to spend eternity in heaven, you have true joy. Mm-hmm. And external circumstances really can't take that away. You can be bummed about something, yeah, but you still have that joy. So happiness is external and it's fleeting. Mm-hmm. Joy is internal, and it's permanent. The Bible says, and I'll butcher this verse, but it says, don't store up treasure for yourself on earth where the thieves can break in and steal and the moths can chew holes in your cashmere sweater. But store up treasure for yourself in heaven, where those things can't get to it. So I think, again, it goes back to that eternal perspective and setting your mind on things above, not on things of the earth, because what is more valuable in eternity, buying the latest bass boat for, I don't know what they cost, $15,000 or $20,000, or sponsoring 10 kids for 15 years that their eternal salvation could rest on that? Which of those has the greater eternal impact? Which of those are going to be rewarded in heaven? Because that bass boat's going to wear out over time. You get out to the lake and it doesn't start, and you get frustrated.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with owning a boat. Mm-hmm. There isn't. But if you compare what you could have done, that opportunity lost to change the eternal destiny of 20 or 30 people, that's kind of the cost analysis that we need to do, is that if you're spending money over here, well, that's money you don't have to send somebody to camp, to sponsor, to send them to a seminar or that type of thing, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I think the enemy, he definitely lies to us and manipulates us. And I think even people who follow the Lord closely and who know about stewardship and they know about what God calls us to do have to rein themselves in constantly on, or at least I know that I do myself. I know that I constantly have to go, okay, I'm not really sure if I needed that, or maybe I should talk to Brittany before I bought that, or maybe we should have spent a couple more days praying on that before we went ahead and purchased that. And it all boils down to, we have an enemy, and he's a liar and he's a thief. Like, ultimately, when you look at that, he's a thief. He steals from us, and he steals from those people that you could have helped as well.
I think sometimes we give Satan too much credit because he has no power except deception, and lying is a form of deception. So he deceives us into thinking all these things are going to make us more fulfilled and make us more happy. But again, it's just a lie. It's the only tool that he has. Yeah. And we just have to be aware of it. Yeah. And just be aware that he's trying to deceive us. That's his job every day, all day long. And he is so very good at it. Yeah. He is so very good at it. I'm still amazed that he got a third of the angels to leave the glory of heaven, which my heart just aches to get to heaven.
Yeah.
And they were there and got kicked out.
Yeah. Followed the wrong dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a sad picture for what we see taking place every single day. People believe that they're following the right thing that's going to bring them happiness, and it's not. It's going to take them exactly where Satan took the rest of the angels.
Yeah.
And